Welcome,
Awesome.
everyone, to the Ancestral Cure Podcast. If you're a health-driven individual passionate about optimizing your health through nutrition, supplements, blood work, certain lifestyle changes, then this podcast is perfect for you. It's been a while, but we're back, and today I've got a great guest on. He is a fitness trainer. He works for a fertility clinic, if that's correct, and he sort of he sort of was the bro science guy before bro science became a term. So please welcome Alexander Cortes, also known as AJAC. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Julian.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, AJAC's quite popular in the, I guess you could call it biohacking, bro science, space online on the Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. So I'd love for you to give a bit of an introduction to how you got into bodybuilding, fitness, health, and I guess where it all started for you.
Yeah. I'll be 37 this year. I've been a personal trainer since I was 20. So it's been a while now. Um, how did I get into it? I didn't originally plan on having a career in the health fitness industry. I went to college, many years ago now, and I was getting a degree in dance choreography. Wanted to be a professional ballet dancer, which was a long time ago. And I got very injured my freshman year of college. Had a hamstring tendon rupture, which permanently left my left leg not fully functional. The left hamstring doesn't do hip extension. It can only do knee flexion to a limited degree. So I had that injury pretty severe. Was pretty depressed for a while. Just body's never been the same because of that. The tendon got tore off. Couldn't have it reattached. And then I had to do my own rehab. So I had to do my own rehabilitation and figure that out, which took a while. And I had a lot of postural asymmetry. I was using a cane for years because the leg, like I said, I couldn't walk, I couldn't run, couldn't do a lot of things. Uh, and the process of figuring out the rehabilitation, I got interested into health and fitness training, and I was already health conscious. I started lifting weights when I was 16. I like to go to the gym. I was one of those guys where I was very enthusiastic about it. And then as college came to an end, knew I wasn't going to be dancing. Didn't know what else to do. Liberal arts degree is pretty worthless. I was like, well, I think I could become a personal trainer, and that pays more than a minimum wage. So let's just do that. I couldn't not think of anything else. Didn't have any real job skills, of course, but other than working out and being really into it. So I started personal training. My junior year, I graduated early, junior year of college, and I just never stopped really. Although it's been a few years since I've actually trained clients now in person. But I did that all through my 20s. I lived in Los Angeles. I was a personal trainer in Hollywood. Was a part of that scene for a while. Worked with people in the entertainment industry. Had some Bollywood clientele. Went to India for quite a period of time. Came back. And then around 2012, 2013, I started basically microblogging, I guess you could call it, on Facebook. And I got noticed by a couple of people for my articles, or I guess, or my writing um, on Facebook. And then I had the idea to start writing articles for a couple of websites. That turned into a gig at Muscle and Fitness Magazine. So I was one of the, I guess, sort of like the last writers for Muscle and Fitness Magazine, Ironman Magazine, a few others before the ship sailed on magazine writing. At one time in the fitness industry, the most prestigious thing you could do, this was before your time, but at one time, the most prestigious thing you could do in the fitness industry was you could uh, own a gym, you could start like maybe a supplement brand, or you could be a magazine writer. And magazine writers were very esteemed. Now, today, no one would care about that. You can chat GPT everything, but you go back 10, 15, 20 years, like the biggest names in fitness were people who wrote for the magazines. So I caught the tail end of that. I was able to post some articles, which was cool. Looks cool, I guess, on a fitness resume. And then from there, I basically started a personal brand before personal branding was a thing. We didn't have the language for it, 15 years ago. But I started, really consistently writing online, consistently had a column on a couple of websites, and started tweeting on X, on Twitter, when it was still Twitter. And then over time, that just grew and grew and grew. And I realized over, this is almost 20 years ago, basically. But I realized back then the internet was the largest information knowledge economy in the world. Everybody gets online every day to find things out, find out information. So if you are someone that has expertise and you are a good communicator, whether that be writing or video now, videos are obviously very popular. If you have expertise, you're good at communicating, you have personality that people resonate with, you can potentially cultivate a following, you can grow your audience, and that could be a way that you can make a living. So it's pretty unique. Solopreneurship. Now we got all these words for it. Back in 2013, nobody knew what the hell describe it. The idea of being a brand online, that was completely novel. But I've stuck with it. I've done it for a long time now. I have a pretty good sized audience, especially given I've never really ventured outside of writing. I'm not a video guy. I'm a writing guy. It's because writing comes very naturally to me. And so that's allowed me to do a lot and make a lot of great connections. I have an incredible network of friends from my audience. I've been able to help launch a couple of companies. I started a fertility coaching company with my wife over a year ago. And that's also is what allowed me to launch my American creatine company very recently. So, and that takes us to now 2026.
Yeah, that's really inspiring because obviously this was like early 2010s and social media was completely
Mm-hmm.
different. So before we sort of delve into the fitness side of things, is there any
Yeah.
sort of advice you'd give to young people today? So I'm 21, but just people my age who,
Mm-hmm.
whether they went to university, college, and they're pursuing a degree or whether they want to go through that entrepreneurial mindset, like what are some lessons that
Mm-hmm.
you would tell them? And would you say it's easier or more difficult to do that now compared to, say, 2012, 2013?
That's a good question. The way I would encourage a younger person who, like you're someone your age, to think about the world, because we grew up in very different times. Obviously, you were born in the 2000s. I was born 1989, right? So I grew up in the 1990s. And I was the last of the generation where you were told to go to college and you'd have a job, and that job would be very set. You'd have a career. You'd probably do the same thing over the course of your life. You'd have an employer. And that was the pathway. I didn't know anyone wealthy when I was a kid. I didn't know about entrepreneurship or starting a business or going into finance, Wall Street. I was not exposed to anything like that. My model for success was at some point, I guess I'd have a job and someone would pay me a bunch of money. Maybe I get paid $200 an hour. Wow. And that would make me rich somehow. Was not, I didn't have an articulate mental model of how getting wealthy, financial success, what that looked like at all. And then I go through college, 2008, recession happens. Maybe you remember that a little bit. Certainly if you did in the United States, saw a lot of people lose their homes. That was very impactful. And I realized that adults, people who were experts, they didn't understand how the world worked. If you got caught off guard by that whole sort of recession event over 2.5, 3 years, how could you claim that you have an accurate mental model of how economic reality operates? Now, that said, just because you realize that people don't understand things, that doesn't mean that you know what's true either. So you can know that something's false, but it doesn't necessarily point you towards what is, accurate. So it took me a long time to figure that out in my 20s. And what I eventually came to realize, and I had various mentors along the way, who are much older than I am at this point. Mike Cernovich, Scott Adams, his book, How to Fail at Everything, Still Win Big. Really excellent book. I actually recommend reading. But I realized that if you want to be adaptable for the world, is that you have to think of yourself in terms of your skill sets and your experience that comes with them. Because as we've seen in your lifetime, the advent of the internet and the accessibility of information, and now things like artificial intelligence, LLMs, the ability to produce content faster and people's consumption habits around that, how people learn things, where they go to information, it's become this massive, massive universe. So how do you compete in that? Well, you have to have a talent stack. You have to have skills. And I believe the foremost skills that everyone should have that will always serve you is communication. So if you're able to write well, which being able to write is being able to speak. So if you're able to write well and you're able to speak well, and you can communicate something clearly that you have domain expertise in, which you can pick and choose what it is that you're passionate about that you think is valuable to the world. And then you can do that and someone will pay you. You kind of have this like quadrant that forms. You'll probably be all right. Now, with that, going from, let's say, being a worker to owning a business, making a lot of money, that's being able to systemize what you know and scale up some operational version of yourself, within a larger framework. And then now you have a business. Now you are an entrepreneur. Now you're doing something that's not just you working one-to-one. But that's how I've always thought about life, certainly for the last 20 years, of like, what are my skills? What am I good at? And that's why I went all in on writing so many years ago. I'm like, writing is super valuable. Most people are not good writers. And most people, how come they can't write well? Well, they don't really read. Very few people, I don't say very few people, but the majority of the population, past a certain point, they don't invest much in their own education that way. Not necessarily academic education, but just enriching your mind and learning and trying to understand the world more and more. So I've always read a lot. I always write. I always communicate every day. And, obviously I've grown an audience around that. And that's, brought me great success. And then, with that is marketing, being able to market yourself, being able to tell a story, persuasion, being able to persuade people, having people think at least, hopefully you are trustworthy, or things, and you can communicate that. Persuasion is critical. Being able to even simple things like organizing your time, managing your energy. These are things that if you're very healthy, you take for granted, but then you get into the professional world. I was a personal trainer for a long time, still am. A lot of people are unhealthy. A lot of people are very poor at managing their energy, managing their focus. So, over the course of, my life from like 20 to 37 now, 17 years, 18 years, I've just kept stacking up all those skills, with a corresponding experience. Other things, having risk tolerance, we're not being afraid to fail. A principle I've always lived by is that you should always fail forward. It's okay to fail. Don't get upset that something didn't work, but make sure that you fail ahead of where you were before. You don't want to get knocked back to zero. And if you can do that, because a lot of businesses trying things and finding out that they don't work, you'll eventually find something that does. And when you get to a certain point, being the age I'm at now, even if I was to hypothetically like lose everything in a day, I still have my skill sets, I still have my network, I still have all the things I've built over time. So at a certain point, you develop enough success, enough capability that you're always going to come out ahead. Or even if you get stopped, you get knocked down, you get the literal, metaphorical, wind knocked out of you, you can still get back up. You can still do something. But that's I'm so to try to summarize all of that. That's why I would tell a young person: just communication, skill sets. Keep trying to learn more things that you think are valuable. And especially with the digital technologies, always be good with technology. Whatever it is that's new, that's hot. Like 25 years ago it was the internet, getting online and doing a dial-up, which is archaic now. People who are resistant to technology, they don't survive. Whatever the tools are that are new and available to us, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or LM or even things like coding. I've taught myself how to code in my late 30s. But because like I want to know how, right? Now we have the ability to learn through the various platforms. Always be on the cutting edge of technology, because then you can see where the world's going, and you'll see where the discrepancies are and where the value is. Which on a day-to-day basis, it's just learn something every day, communicate something every day, do something to enrich your mind, and then stay healthy. That's how I would condense it down to 4 things.
Right. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I mean, being able to master a skill, and especially if it's something you're passionate in, I always think like if you're young and you've discovered something that you're passionate in, I think you've got a moral duty to just articulate it and communicate and educate others on it. Um, but I think a lot of people my age are starting to
Mhm.
wake up to the fact that I guess you could say the whole system of like go to university, college, and then land a corporate job, it doesn't really allow people to shine and demonstrate their potential. Whether it's some sort of skill they've got, or like in a way, sort of you're being confined to this one role and you're not being able to
Hmm.
show people your full potential, especially if it's a job in which you're not allowed to share what you believe about certain things. So, do you think the, I guess we could call it like the higher education system and also like entry level jobs, would you say these are a net positive or a net negative on the trajectory of young people, but especially men?
Yeah, well, the challenge with higher education is that it's set up for a system that no longer exists. So if you went to college 60 years ago, you'd pretty much be, set for life, assuming you just had work ethic and just a basic level of intelligence. Like you got a degree. 60 years ago, most people didn't have degrees. Now degrees have become very common. 60 years ago, the quality of education was a lot higher. Now, certainly in the United States, because more and more people go to college, the overall level of education has gone down just because it's always going to care to the lowest common denominator, which that the bottom has dropped out. So if you go to a prestigious school, you can still get a good education. You can still potentially get a quality education. Absolutely. But competition is higher. What that gets you now doesn't go as far as it once did. Uh, College itself, depending upon where you go to school, very ideological, very politicized. Education could be crap potentially, where it's like just kind of a waste of time. It's because of the way it's delivered and who the teachers are, and it's very inefficient. So telling people like don't go to college, like is that good advice? There are fields where you absolutely need credentials, no question. If you want to be a lawyer, you better go to law school. I don't know how else you can learn the law. Well, hypothetically, you could teach yourself. Maybe that's coming in the future. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be, certainly like a lot of the STEM fields, engineering, your best bet is probably going to be university route. But there's a lot of soft routes now, the humanities, things like that I don't really think are relevant at all. And then today too, if you have the entrepreneurial business mind kind of spirit, and you want to start a business, you want to do something that's not just you working. Are you going to learn how to start a business in college? Probably not. Business school, in my opinion, is pretty worthless. Uh, I know people who've gone. I know people who've gone to college and spent a couple of years, and they get an MBA, and they're 30, and they still have never started a business, which I just find extraordinary. Like I started my first business, when I was like 22. And it didn't like work out that well, but like just the fact that I started one gave me experience, right? Um, so for like young men, you really have to assess your talents and what you want your future to be, which in a very changing world, right? And assess your talents, what you envision yourself doing, what actually interests you. Nobody can give you interest in something. Like you actually have to go out and try things. And then you have to figure out, like based on that, like, okay, my natural talents, what I'm passionate about, does that align with an educational pathway is this going to college? Is that something maybe it's better to, in the United States, maybe should I go into the military? That can be a very good, life path for some people. Is this something where going to a technical school would make sense? Or, is there something right now that I could just start a business with my friends? I know guys who've done that as well. Uh, but you have to very accurately assess yourself. And if you can't think of anything at all, then all choices are equal. Like that's why I always tell young people, if every choice possible is like 50, 50, 50, 50, 50, that could work, that could work, that could work, that could work. And there's no way to distinguish anything. That just literally flip a coin and pick something. Because you don't know that's okay. You don't know yourself well enough to even make an accurate assessment. Uh, but if you start out young and hopefully your teens, where you try things, try lots of things, try different sports, try different clubs, be curious about the world. You should, by the time you're early 20s, have some calibration in a direction that you think you want to go in, and then you just proceed and make mistakes along the way and try to hold yourself some kind of North Star.
Yeah, because I was 19 when I sort of discovered that health coaching was what I'm passionate about, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
like functional blood work, circadian rhythm, nutrition, supplements, training. So, and like I did realize that I didn't really need the degree that I'm studying. It can help,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. It's
Yeah.
biochemistry. So it can help me understand things. But in terms of the things that they're teaching us in the curriculum, it's like, are they going to be teaching? Well, firstly, this is not even to bring up the whole like health agenda or whatever, but the mainstream health agenda. But like on the business side of things, you're probably not going to learn that from even a business degree. But when it comes to like health coaching, I just feel like with centralized education, there's this just one size fits all narrative. This is what you have to believe. You're not allowed to question things that go against the narrative. So, like, I've tried to speak to professors and higher ups in my university, talking about things like cholesterol and saturated fats, basic topics,
Mm,
which, like, I guess which I discovered were debunked when I was 19. But
yeah.
it just seems like if you're not willing to abide by this one curriculum and one train of thought where you're not allowed to question it and they don't actually provide any rebuttals because, well, they don't know it, but they've also never really had people question them. So
Mm.
it just feels to me that I guess it depends on the subject, but anything to do with health, you're going to have this one size fits all narrative and they're not going to be very flexible to hearing new ideas. So I don't think credentials or qualifications are what's going to help people move the needle in this industry.
I can believe that. I mean, when I was in college, it's because I was getting a dance degree, which is not a real degree at all. Uh, yeah, it wasn't like the quality of education was terrible. It's just like a lot of if like, dancing is an art form, there's no way to truly like having a degree in art. I think is sort of a not archaic, but just ridiculous, sort of ridiculous construct. It's like having a degree like in boxing. It's like you either can box or you can't. Like a boxer is judged by their record, by their years fighting. That's their qualifications. Dancing you're really assessed by your actual dancing ability, how long you've been dancing. Trying to create an academic qualification around that is quite ridiculous. But then I have friends who went to college for much more rigorous subjects where their degree was quite useful for them. Health though, because health is such a dynamic field, and I've seen so many things change in my lifetime with health and exercise science, which exercise science itself is a pretty loose science and not very rigorous, in any way. Some people would like it to be, but exercise sciences can be kind of ridiculous. Uh, so, like, I've never assigned much credibility to accreditation. Uh, and then I know people who get PhDs and they're extremely proud to have a PhD. A PhD just means you're like the smartest idiot. Honestly, they're not that challenging to get. They're challenging in the sense they require a lot of work. But do you actually need to be intelligent? Do you need to be scientific to get a PhD? No, you don't. And as you've discovered in your own university experience, a lot of education is just following the line as to what the dogma is. It's not questioning things, nor is it even being cutting edge. It's just following a curriculum that was probably established 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years ago, and you just regurgitate it. So then, like, what does that leave you with? I'm like, well, you have to do your own education, which ironically, that's, today that's found online, and it's found with people who are just very daring thinkers. They're able to express themselves. That's one of the amazing things about X that I'm always impressed with. People can complain about social media a lot, but you can find the most amazing people with incredible knowledge to teach you things. And they, maybe they're university educated, maybe they're not, but they have a depth of experience, understanding, and background that you're probably not going to find in conventional schooling.
Yeah, exactly. I think the future of education, in the health space specifically, it's instead of just blindly trusting people with credentials or qualifications, it's doing your own research. It's reading studies, even like X Twitter posts, and saying, does this make sense based on what I've researched? Um, Trying to play devil's advocate and, see like whose argument addresses whose argument. There's a lot of debate even amongst the, I guess you could say, like the bro science health space. You've got like carnivore people who debate Ray Peat, who debate Jack Cruz. So I think I think all of this is good because it's like it's not centralized. People are thinking critically, and I think the future of education really lies in people understanding that the system, you can't just rely on it. You have to do your own research. And ultimately that's what education is, right? It's learning new things, challenging the paradigms. I tell people it's like they'll treat the paradigm as if it's like a finite set of facts. And what I'll say is that, well, you guys realize that these ideas were new at some point. Like they didn't just exist from the start of like the beginning. Um, these ideas were new at some point. So you can't just reject things because they're new. But do you think that it's useful to tell people to just like reject the centralized system and just reject credentialism qualifications, or do you think there's more merit in trying to um, upheave and change the curriculum, even though it might be tricky just for one person to do it?
Well, I mean, the thing with wanting to sort of like red pill people, like, don't trust the system, is that people need to arrive at skepticism and doubt along their own path. You can't push somebody into like seeing the truth at all. If they start to question things, that will happen naturally for them, just because of their own experiences. As far as reforming the system, like that, I am very skeptical that systems can really be reformed from within. It's not that because it's just too hard. It's not that it's just too hard. It's that if you are talking about sort of replacing all the people, the thinkers in the system, and it's very ossified, it's not necessarily worth the time. Rather, right? You're almost better off building something new. Uh, I think it'd be probably an easier thing to start a new university than try to reform an old one. So I live in Austin, Texas. There's a new university here, University of Austin, that was established on sort of having a classical curriculum, like classical liberalism, open-mindedness, presenting different viewpoints, and that's a new university that started the last 3 years. And the founders and the guys behind that, they, similar to yourself, saw the education had become corrupted. But rather than try to pick a university and say we're going to change this old one, they started a new one, and it's going well. So if you do believe that you have a better way of doing things and you'd like to educate people in that better system, build around that. Trying to go into the old hallways, so to speak, probably you're going to be frustrated for a long time, and you won't get as far as you would have if you had started your own thing.
Hmm. Yeah, this reminds me a lot of the homeschooling debate, where a lot of people sort of they see homeschooling as like you're sort of like it's cowardice or you're escaping the system, and I do understand that. I think their argument is that like you shouldn't just be trying to run away from it, but rather fix the current broken one. So do you see those as do you see homeschooling as like a similar situation?
Um, yeah, I mean, I've never cared what people think that way. If you should try to like fight against like a failing system, I'm just not going to deal with it. I have lived my entire life with under the auspices of not having to deal with bullshit. Just to say it that simple. I don't want to have to deal with people's bullshit. If this system is bullshit, if I think publication is bullshit, I'm not saying my kids do it. I thought public education was shitty when I was 8. And I knew before I ever had kids ever that I would never put my kids in public school, that I could do it better, because I know I'm smarter than, not just smarter than teachers. I know that it's an inefficient system that, again, caters to the lowest common denominator, and it will continuously get worse because it's been ideologically poisoned for many reasons. So I was like, I'm not doing this. Um, whether people think that that's cowardly or not doesn't fucking make a difference to me at all. Something like public education. So something like homeschooling, I'm like, all right, like I know that I'm a good educator. I know that I'll marry somebody eventually in the future, which I did, who will be good at things I'm not good at, and I will create an education around that. And then also because of COVID, thankfully, that massively accelerated homeschooling in the United States, because parents realized, wait, the school I send my kids to is actually kind of crappy. And I could do this better and faster. And you absolutely can. The stereotype that homeschool is like you keeping your kids in a basement away from the world is fucking silly. Uh, the homeschooling networks that exist now are growing by the day. Like my kids get lots of socialization outside, and in much more dynamic environments with very high caliber of kids, and they're already ahead of their age brackets. Being only like 4 and 3 years old. No, 2 and 4 actually. So like I it's worked out. Like my foresight has been correct. Would it be worth it to me to go like to my local school board and try to change public education here? No, that's not worth my time at all. I do live in a good place where the public schools are pretty good, but again, I consider public schooling just inefficient the way it's set up. So I'm not going to go that route. If you are of the type that has a very sovereign mindset, you're always going to do things your way, and I always do things my way. How that's viewed by the external world is meaningless.
Yeah, the reason I asked was because my friends were telling me that I should try to influence a university and try to get my ideas across, see if they respond to it, use the science, like try not to come at it as like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong, but more so, this is what I believe, this is why I believe what I believe. And I did try that, but it doesn't seem to be working. And I think you're right that
Mhm.
for a lot of people, like there's just a lot better things you could be doing with your time.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Um, I mean, if someone really feels called to go into the system and they're going to change it from the inside, like, more power to them. But it's going to require more than one person. You're going to need a coalition. You're going to need backing support. You're going to need trends to align, so to speak, that make your mission worthwhile. Obviously, I live in the United States. The government under the Trump administration has been changing a lot since he won again, obviously. Um, but he's not. It's not just one man literally changing the system. He has a whole team of people behind him. He has the whole. He has half the country behind that vote for him. So it's a much broader effort than just one guy trying to do something. And it's something that can take time to learn. If you do want to sincerely change an institution, you're going to need a team of people. You're going to need a lot of help. And maybe it is worth your while. Maybe you consider that a worthy mission to do that. But just attempting it as a solo artist, just you're probably going to burn yourself out.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let's sort of talk about the fitness industry, the bodybuilding industry, and sort of compare it. Because I know you said back in the early 2010s, or even a bit earlier than that, it was like
Mhm.
magazines and people selling supplements. How do you think the fitness industry online and offline has evolved to now? And do you think it's improved or gotten worse?
I think it's improved enormously. I mean, if you go back to like the pre-internet days, uh, before YouTube, right? Like, let's say before YouTube, uh, and you want to learn how to lift weights, you want to go to the gym, you could buy magazines, and you had to. I mean, I know this because I wrote for magazines. So if you want to learn how to do an exercise, you had to read a written description of the exercise, and you look at pictures. And the magazine writers actually had to be very good trainers, where they had to know how to very accurately describe a movement. So you had the magazines, you could get books, like Arnold's Educational Bodybuilder or Guide to Bodybuilding. There's books, right? Lots of really good old books. But that was it. There was nothing to watch at all. If you want to find out what like the cutting edge stuff was, there were internet forums in the 1990s. Uh, if you were, but the fact that you were on a forum like in 1998, like you were already in a very small group of people. Yeah, so the state of education was pretty poor. Now that said, it didn't mean that people were dumb, but just the only way to learn things was to go to the gym and try them and talk to people who were more experienced than you. Yeah, and some of the information was quite good. A lot of bro science theories, as they're called, that were criticized and critiqued for years, have turned out to be correct. There's a big long list of things around whether it's joint specific strength training, the necessity of like good blood flow in the pump for having this maybe not muscle growth so much, but like secondary muscle growth, and preventing injury. Certain sequencing of exercises they are shown to be effective, or just even the fact that exercises not all being equal, there's a hierarchy to movements, and being able to customize for your body type and your bone structure and all those kinds of things. Um, Ketogenic dieting or low carb dieting, high protein diet, the necessity of muscle tissue. A lot of things have come out of the bro world, and maybe they weren't always described in perfectly scientific terms, but there was a directional kind of understanding or holistic kind of understanding they were important. And then 20, 30, 40 years goes by, and then a study's done. It's like, oh, yes, yeah, muscle is very important as you age. Like, no shit, really. Like, really, compound movements. Like, yeah, they do recruit more muscle tissue. Really, wow, that's amazing. Oh, low carb dieting can be a way for success. Really, you can lose fat in a low carb diet. Oh, wow, like things are very remedial now that one time were controversial. Um, so trust in bros, as I say. And at the same time, because the people doing what I consider bro science, they're doing real sciences, which they're being open minded, they're trying things and seeing what works. It's very outcome driven. Yeah, and of course, if you want to get down to the mechanisms of muscle growth and get down to molecular level, yeah, go to the university and study that. But at the end of the day, for the 99.99% of the public, they just want to be healthy. The guys in the gym lifting weights want to build muscle and know that the process they're following is going to work. So looking back in time, like it has changed dramatically. The average guy now going to the gym has access to so much more information than anyone did 20 years ago. It's just staggering, honestly. And people train smarter now. I'm always kind of impressed when I watch younger guys train. People are a lot more balanced. Like there's kind of an understanding now that you should, like train all muscles equally. Uh, people don't, are like the jokes about people skipping leg day are kind of like dead jokes. Like everyone trains their legs now. Women lift. That was a big change. When I went to the gym when I was in high school, there were no girls there at all. There was none. There'd be like a couple of older women maybe that like got into lifting in the 80s. You didn't see teenage girls lifting weights. That was unheard of. Like maybe there'd be like one girl who was like, I'm just trying to think of like, oh, like one of the girls who played volleyball, her volleyball trainer said like, go do squats. Like, I mean, you really didn't see women in the gym at all that were in your age, right? It's mostly dudes. Now you go to the gym, after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, school lets out, half of it's teenage boys and half of it's teenage girls. And all the girls were all training their butt like 8 days a week. I was that was a big change. Even the exercises, right? Everyone kind of knows now that like, squat, bench, deadlift, hip thrust, try to train heavy, push yourself. I think the level of effort actually is higher. People train harder. So it's gotten way, way better. I mean, that's why the fitness market, health market has grown geometrically. It's so much bigger than it ever was. So that in that sense, at least amongst young people, so in that sense, it's way, way better. The traps that fall into, like the young people fall into now, maybe they get too into science-based lifting. Maybe you're putting like the seatbelt on with like an elbow cuff and a strap and doing some dumb stuff. But everyone does dumb stuff in their first 5 years of lifting. Like it's okay, whatever. It's so much better. And then now you have YouTube. You can learn any exercise in a minute. Just pull up on your phone. Movements that nobody knew how to do 20 years ago because there was no pictures of it. Like I remember when chest supported rows were like a big deal. What is that? Nobody knew what a chest supported row was. Like you have to ask somebody like, what exercise is this? It's like, oh, you on the bench and you rolled up. Oh, okay, that's cool. Because it actually wasn't a common movement. Now everyone does exercise. I remember when face pulls were like controversial. Like a face pull. What's a face pull? Everyone knows what the hell a face pull is now. There's nothing like interesting to talk about the face pull. 15 years ago, that was like a cutting edge exercise. The hip thrust, right? We all know what a hip thrust is. I'm assuming if you're listening to this. I remember when the first hip thrust articles came out in 2009. It's almost 20 years ago. And Brett Contreras was describing, go ahead, babe. Brett Contreras was describing in the article with like some very rough pictures on like a Polaroid from like Polaroids, like here's a hip thrust. I was like, wow, what the hell is that? And tons of people thought it was stupid. Like there's no way it's a real exercise. Yeah, it is. Now everybody does them. Every girl's doing them every day, and they work. So we live in a golden age for health science, for health knowledge, and it's opened up so many career opportunities for people that didn't exist before. Being a magazine writer now, that's dead and gone. Now it's being a content creator, it's being a creator. So I'm always happy when I see young people like yourself getting into the industry and they want to coach, they want to teach. Like that's good. Like that's a 100% net positive for everybody. And if you're passionate about it for a long time, and then 10 years from now, you could have obviously a big audience, a big following. You could have a whole business built around that.
Yeah, I think, and it also just a community as well. The community, the camaraderie that comes with fitness, weightlifting, powerlifting. So I agree with you that it's improved. I was I was like 18 when I started getting into like the gym and lifting. Um and I'd consider myself back then like typical gym bro where it was like
Mm-hmm.
emphasis on high protein. But then back then, and I think a lot of people still fall into this trap where they think like a chocolate bar is healthy just because it says it's got, 15, 20 grams of protein on it, even though it might be full of other ingredients. So that was where I was at when I was 18. But then ever since coming onto this like this health journey and this holistic wellness journey, um, I do sort of see most gym influencers as like hyperfixating on things like macros or how many calories you're eating, but they're not
Mhm.
talking about things like circadian rhythm, the
Mm.
ingredients in these foods, metabolism, things that like the Ray Peats community talks about. So do you sort of see it the same way that like they're only hyperfixated on like these few things like protein, calories, and do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just everyone, where you start from, if you have no knowledge at all about food, this anything in general, then macros can be groundbreaking for you. And then as you maybe learn what macros are, it's like, oh, protein, carbs, fat. What's that? You learn what that is, and then it's like, okay, micros, and then you progress through this chain, up sort of the knowledge tree. The things with circadian health and like micronutrients, biorhythms, getting more into the nuances of metabolic health. That's not new per se. Like people did talk about it 20 years ago, but it's much more widely known now. It's like, whereas 2 decades ago it was extremely niche. Now it's broadly talked about. At least on X it is. I don't know about like the rest of the fitness industry, but the overall approach has become more holistic with time, which that's been very cool to see. One of my mentors, gentleman I worked for, John Meadows, uh, he wasn't the first guy to talk about micronutrients, but he definitely made it popular over a decade ago. Where he was the first bodybuilding coach I ever met, where he was very micro focused. He was very focused on food quality, encouraging people to eat organic, encouraging like healthier fat sources, not just being macros that fit your macros, but like really like were you having monosaturated fats? Were you using coconut oil? Were you trying to optimize, let's say, like using kimchi or like fermented foods for digestion? Which things that strangely enough, I think the fitness industry is kind of forgotten about, at least in the bodybuilding world. It doesn't get talked about enough, but more like the holistic side of the industry does. But I remember him talking about that, writing articles about that. I mean, at this point, it was like 12, 13 years ago. I just wrote a Substack post about his dietary approach, which I think is still 100% cutting edge current. Like something really that's changed with it. Still very up to date. So like the macro approach, I'm like that will probably be your entry point to learning about food, but hopefully that won't be where you stop.
Yeah, exactly. Like I do think because also like I got into health through learning about macros and like high protein or whatever. But I think the problem is that a lot of people just stop there because the gym influencers with the biggest followings, they just talk about, this is 20 grams of protein, this like Greek yogurt or whatever, or this protein bar,
Mm.
but it's like very ultra processed. And I just think a lot of these like high protein snacks, they just encourage people to only fixate on the protein and not consider
Mm.
actual nutrition. And I think I think that's maybe one of the areas where the gym and fitness industry is sort of, I don't know if you'd call it overcorrecting, but I just don't know if it's sending people in the right direction.
I mean, it depends on who the audience is. I mean, but the protein fixation has been around for quite a while. I remember. I mean, it's still around. I remember when as video became more popular in like in the mid 2010s, and there was like sort of this rise of like there's more protein bars. There's an explosion of protein bars. I remember when Quest came out. Quest has been around a while now. I remember when Quest came out, it was like a big deal because the bar it didn't taste terrible. I guess. I mean, I don't think it tastes that good, but Quest came out. That was like a big deal. Then like suddenly there's an explosion of like protein foods, protein pizzas, protein this, protein that, protein treats, which I hate protein desserts. I think it's so stupid. Uh, but like a decade later, like it really hasn't changed. Like people still just like protein, protein, protein. Like there's a protein in it. Um, and I think sometimes it's somewhat of like a young person phenomenon, where if you've been in the industry a while and you've become more holistically educated, you realize it's not just all about protein. Hopefully you've learned about the other systems of digestion in the body, micronutrients. But if you're just getting started and you're like 23 and like you're a girl and you just want to like look hot, then the protein treats and the protein cakes and the protein whatever the hell like that's very appealing. It's easy to latch onto. Now, does that mean you're going to be in great health? No. I mean, one of the jokes in the industry is how many fitness competitors, physique competitors, people whose job is to basically look good naked, right? How many of them had bad digestion and screwed up health, and their diet is not actually working the way they demonstrate it to be. But you gotta learn the hard way. So I mean, if you're someone where you're suffering though, and like you're in poor health, is protein going to solve all your problems? Probably not. Like it's going to require more than that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you could call it an overcorrection because I guess the mainstream narrative is like protein, red meat's bad, like protein damages kidneys, damages organs, which we can talk about. So, as much as I don't like the hyperfixation on like eat this much protein, fight like just don't we're kept to just eat the protein desserts and they're filled with artificial sweeteners, whatever. Um, you could argue that for someone to enter the holistic space, they first have to go through the whole protein fixation first. Um, but yeah, I guess you could call it an overcorrection. And you've talked a lot about the Indian diet on your
Mm-hmm.
Instagram and the problem with so like you said lack of protein. I think you said too much refined carbohydrates. Is there anything else you'd add to that?
I mean, what I call like the standard Indian diet, and I call it that because I've been to India many times, like over 6, 7 times now. I've spent a long time in the country. My wife is she's born in the United States, but she's of Indian origin. It's just carbohydrate dominant with at this point a lot of like it's carbohydrates, fat, very low protein intake, and then that doesn't lend itself to good metabolic health. Obviously, that this lends itself to diabetes and insulin resistance. And then the other factor is that a lot of Indians they have what's called a South Asian phenotype, so they're more prone to metabolic syndrome. They already have low lean body mass, so they get skinny fat easier. So then you add in the diet on top of those genetics, and it just results in very unhealthy people. It's like, well, what do you do about that? I mean, well, in their case, like, yeah, you actually just need to eat more protein and not eat so much goddamn rice and sugar all the time, and clean up your fat sources. Uh, and then training wise too, like the less genetic talent you have, the more proactive you have to be with your health. There are people who have very good health genetics that they can kind of get away with bad habits. But if you're that person, you probably know that already. And at the same time, you don't want to rely on your genetics as saving you from being unhealthy. At a certain point, your bad habits will catch up to you. And then what do? Well, then you have to learn things at a much older age, potentially make major changes in your 40s or 50s, and it's an uphill kind of battle against your own inertia. So I mean, I would encourage people to always be proactive with their health when they're young, and certainly if you're Indian, it's not as if you're cursed with a bad physique, but like you're going to have to clean some things up and make some dramatic changes. Yeah, and then culture at the same time too. Like there's big cultural differences. The United States, U.S. has a fitness culture. We have a sport culture. There's lots of very fit people here. Lots of sports, obviously. American football, basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer. Every sport in America has its scene. We've got lots of great athletes. You can go to the gym, you see really fit people working out, muscular guys. India doesn't really have any of that. People just play. No, people really don't play sports at all. It's like cricket. That's about it. So there's no like cultural tradition, so to speak, of like being like fit in shape, looking good. There's no Indian equivalent to like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Schwarzenegger is I mean, he's from originally from Austria, but Schwarzenegger is he's American. The whole golden age of bodybuilding, like that took place in America. It couldn't have taken place anywhere else. So you have to, on your health journey, if you're from that kind of background, you're probably going to run up against some cultural resistance as well to you doing that, which you have to just kind of ignore basically and do your own thing. But yeah, I mean, that's the South Indian diet for you. Like, my wife, she's extremely healthy. We've got 3 kids. She's super fit. We got a home gym. She works out every day. So it's just, that's also her personality. Obviously, she's American. She grew up in the United States. If you're coming from a country where everybody is unhealthy and everybody past 40 is overweight and out of shape, you're going to have to learn some new mental habits and beliefs and break out of your old mindset.
Yeah, and I mean, not to mention that vegetarianism is obviously huge in India.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think yeah, like Hinduism, Sikhism, they both promote vegetarianism. And then when you said, did you say they had a high fat or a low fat diet?
It's like a higher fat diet. I mean, the thing with vegetarians in India is like the number of people who are truly like vegan is low.
Mhm.
A lot of people are like, maybe you call it eggetarian. They'll have like eggs, or maybe they have meat like once a week. But it's a very carbohydrate dominant diet. Like, it doesn't have much protein taken in it at all. Um, and if you're like hypothetically, if you were like an agricultural worker, like in a field, like it would fuel you. You'd still be skinny, but it's not designed for like optimal human health. It's basically like a poverty diet. That's how I describe it. It's poverty macros, literally. Um, but India historically was a very, very poor country. So like what I would call like its peasantry diet became its popular diet in a way, and it does everybody a disservice in regards to their health.
Yeah, and it's funny because the repeat community advocates for like high carbohydrate, moderate protein intake. They advocate for saturated fats over on like seed oils.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of interesting how the Indian diet is also like high carbohydrate, low protein. Though I guess you could
Mm-hmm.
argue that with them, it's like super refined carbohydrates cooked in a bunch of seed oils, and they even if they get protein, it's from um like plant sources, less
Mm-hmm.
bioavailable. So things like tofu,
Yeah.
um, lentils, and I mean, I think you did a video where you said that like even if you're not vegetarian in India, it doesn't mean you're getting enough protein.
Well, yeah, because I mean, remember, firstly, Indians don't eat tofu at all. That's an
Oh,
Asian
really?
thing. Indians
Yeah,
don't have tofu. Indians, like, their protein sources are like lentils, basically, or mung
dal,
beans, dal, yeah, right. Like that's about it. Yogurt. Um,
paneer, I
even
think
if,
cheese.
yeah, near cheese. I mean, it's fatty, right? But even if Indians eat protein, it's like, let's say you get like a chicken biryani. Oh wow, okay, it's just chicken and rice. Yeah, every culture in the world thinks they have like really unique food. No, they don't. There's There's like 3 or 4 great cuisines of the world. You have Japan, you have France, French cooking, you have Italian, and I'll throw Greek food in there. Everybody else, your cooking's not that amazing. It can be good, it can be hearty, but it's not an art form. Those forms of cuisine are art forms, and they come from very like high civilizational cultures. Everybody else, I don't want to hear your arguments about how your food's fucking amazing and special. And anyway, anyway, but yeah, so like, chicken biryani, it's chicken and rice, and people eat it. And what they do is they eat like 3 cups of rice, and they have a chicken drumstick,
Mm.
and like that's their like, oh, I had protein. Like, you had 9 grams of protein, and whatever, 150 grams of carbohydrates. Like, and that's your meal. It's like, this is why you're diabetic.
Mm. Would you say that people in India would benefit from like the hyperfixation on protein, like even if it's processed, like ultra processed protein bars and protein treats?
Um, I'm, I don't even know where to start with that. I mean, they benefit from a lot of things. Try. I mean, here's the thing. Like when I made those videos, like, so many Indians were so pissed, right? Of course they were. People cultures get very defensive about their food, whatever. But just having I'd say it's a more balanced diet where it's, let's say, like, 20, 30% protein, 23% fat, 20, 33, 33, 30, 33, 33, 33, triple, triple, triple three. That's a good diet model. Like that actually works really well. You can adjust up and down. The other challenge with India is they actually don't have much fresh vegetables.
Mm.
So it's a lot of like grains, a lot of rice, lentils, dal, right? But it's not like a salad culture per se. It's not a fresh veggie culture that way. If they do have vegetables, it's very, 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 very cooked. So it's like chopped, fried, seasoned, fried, oil, stewed. It's like, and then you eat it. And like, yeah, again, it's just I consider it like peasantry food. Um, yeah, like going to India and like wanting like sort of like a fresh vegetable dish. It's like that doesn't really exist. Yeah. So like again, it's just very grain based.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that, like Indian restaurants and stuff. But to talk about to go back to the fitness industry, do you think the whole obsession with like calories in, calories out, that's obviously a huge topic. And my
Mm-hmm.
perspective is that that statement, calories in, calories out, it's not incorrect. It's just that the people who push that statement don't actually consider factors which affect calories in, calories out. So things like yeah, like gut health, how circadian rhythm affects metabolic health, what time are you eating? Um, are the nutrients you're getting enough to facilitate metabolism? But they
Mm-hmm.
sort of treat the only variable as like how many calories does this food packet say on it? That's how I sort of see it. But what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, the thing like Seiko, I've always found this to be kind of a pseudo argument, maybe. But then, like, if you talk to people who work in medicine, it is a legitimate argument. Uh, Energy intake and energy output; those are all real things. Like you can't say they're not real. Like they're absolutely real. Uh, but telling someone just eat less, it obviously overlooks a lot of factors with metabolism, as you just said. So it's not that it's false; just it's not a complete picture uh, as to what constitutes actual healthy eating. It's going to be more than just eat less. What are you eating? How much? Are you actually consuming enough macro and micronutrients to be metabolically healthy and meet all your nutrient needs? And that's what for a long time just didn't get discussed at all. It was just covered calorie fixation. Eat 1,600 calories a day, 2,000 calories a day. Oh, okay, and like that's it. Yeah. Well, yeah, that does people a disservice. Obviously, it's low resolution. I mean, what we know now about metabolism is that, as you said, it's influenced by your sleep cycle, your light exposure, the timing of when you eat does make a difference. How you manage your insulin makes a difference. Satiety plays a huge role. Your micronutrient intake, you have to account for that. Um, so, I would say like the best weight loss coaches in the world, fat loss coaches, they understand that. They understand that and they incorporate that into their practice with people. Uh, and at the same time, like yes, it is true. If you have to lose a lot of weight, you are going to need to cut your overall food intake. But now we have GLPs that can help you do that and manage the appetite. So I mean, I honestly believe that fat loss, I mean, I say this seriously, like scientifically speaking, we've solved fat loss. We know what works. We know what we need to do. We even removed the psychological obstacle from it because we have the GLP medications. So if you're really struggling and you've been overweight like your whole life, we can get rid of that problem for you as well. I think by 2030 there won't be any reason for somebody to be fat unless you just want to. It's going to be a willful choice. Since the resources and the tools are there.
Exactly. And I mean, I wish that gym influencers would talk more about things like metabolism and hormones, gut health, circadian rhythm, micronutrients. And I think it's good that you've got people like like Veronica, people in the repeat space
Mm-hmm.
advocating for like Kitty Blomfield for she's a women's coach who's talks about pro metabolics. Um but it's interesting that you brought up GLP-1s and Ozempic. The way that I think of them is that so obviously we know that GLP-1 is produced naturally in the gut. Um, and what Ozempic does is it's a GLP-1 agonist, so you're boosting levels of GLP-1. But I think if you're not addressing the root cause of, well, why is the GLP-1 suppressed in the first place? It's things like mitochondrial dysfunction. But if you're giving your body a false signal, then you're not going to be eating and regaining those nutrients which facilitate and repair the GLP-1 not working naturally instead. But what are your thoughts on things like Ozempic? Do you think what I've just said, like should we still be promoting them to people for fat loss?
I mean, Ozempic is outdated at this point. So all the GLPs are they're incretin hormones, and there's a variety of them now. Like obviously, so we have Ozempic was the first generation. Well, actually, really the second generation. There was liraglutide before that. You have Ozempic, you have tirzepatide, retatrutide will hit the market fully, probably in 2027. And then there's even things like the cagrelantide, which is an amylin receptor. So we're going to have quadruple GLPs. Technically, we already do. People are already using them that way right now. We'll probably have quintuple ones where people add in something like a growth hormone secretagogue that will help with growth hormone levels. I'm very pro GLPs. Why? Because people are fat.
Mm.
And the fitness industry, for its entire existence, had no answer to obesity. It's not as if people got fatter over time, and then fitness influencers came in, and we were getting people skinny, and we're making the obesity rate go down. The obesity rate went up every single year for decades, for basically like 30 years, longer than that, even 40 years, until Ozempic hit the market, and then around like 2022 to 2023, as Ozempic usage became widespread, it started to drop for the first time. And now it's actually dropping because people are losing weight. Now, are they losing weight the right way? Probably not. But if you had to choose between you can be morbidly obese and die when you're 60 from a quadruple heart attack, or you can take Ozempic and not be obese and reduce all risk factors, maybe end up kind of skinny, fattish, but at least now you're not overweight and you probably do have more energy to go to the gym. I'll take the GLPs. I'll take the Ozempic or the Retta or the tirzepatide. Being obese is a enormous cost in society to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars globally. So if we can get people to not be fat, and it requires some incretin hormones, great. If nothing else, that opens up the market for fitness people. It's like, all right, well, get educated on the GLPs and be the sorts of education as to how to use them responsibly, because they're probably not going to learn that from their doctor. Their doctor's not a trainer. Their doctor's not going to talk to them about resistance training and nutrients and the necessity of optimizing your metabolic health. Like your doctor exists to manage. Doctors exist to manage disease and pathology. They're not health coaches. They're not there to help you optimize. Go to a fitness professional for that.
Mm. And I mean, I think informed consent is important. So if you're prescribing someone with weight loss drugs or GLPs, then I think you do have to tell them that like this isn't the optimal way to lose weight. Though I guess you could argue that if someone's like 600 pounds morbidly obese, then for them, I guess it doesn't really matter how they lose weight, as long as they lose weight in the short term, and then maybe once they've gotten down to like a more reasonable weight, then they can look at things, other methods like pro-metabolic methods. But like I do think informed consent is like would you agree that informed consent is important and that we with these weight loss drugs people need to be aware that they can take them and they can work in the short term, but they aren't a long-term solution and they're not the best solution either.
I mean, here's the thing. I would say that they are the best solution because I've worked with people a long time. This is where I'll say I have more experience. I've
Mm.
worked with people a long time. There is no magical key to human behavior. It doesn't exist. People who are overweight or obese, at least in the States, is about 3/4 of the population. Uh, there's no mindset coaching. There's no method. There is no pro-metabolic pathway you could give them like, oh, don't worry, this will solve your problems. They're still not going to do it because the problem with losing body fat, it's not physical, it's not instructional, it is cognitive, it's psychological. And no one has magical powers that way where they know the right combination of words, speech, motivation to give someone and solve their mental challenges. It doesn't work. It can work. You might be a great coach.
Sorry, guys, due to technical difficulties, this recording had to stop, but we will be doing a part two at some point, so stay tuned for that. I just thought I'd upload part one first, so that you could listen to it. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.